Heavier Trip. Heavier Trip is something I was pretty excited for, but also a little bit hesitant for because, like any sequel to a movie you love, it's very likely that it won't hit the mark. It'll be terrible. It'll be just a cheap ripoff, a pale imitation. That's what everyone worries about when you have a movie you really love, and they do a sequel of it. Now, for anyone out there who hasn't seen Heavy Trip, which is a lot of people probably, we did have a discussion of it on this show. I am a champion of Heavy Trip. It's this Finnish black metal comedy. I kind of always describe it as sort of the Wayne's World of black metal, where you have this band of kind of losers that are all wanting to be metal stars, black metal stars in Finland, trying to get to this Nordic metal festival. And they really don't even have any original songs, and they're on a shoestring hanging in there. And our main guy is kind of the loser guy. There's a bunch of stuff in it, and it's got all the tropes of kind of the band that could, a little band that's got a lot of things going against them, and maybe they're going to make it to the final concert and prove to people how awesome they are. And that's Heavy Trip. And I think the advantage it has is it has that kind of making of, the formation of the beginning of the lore for this band, like where all of the little things come from. And I think that discovery and the fun of finding all the characters in the band and what happens to them and how they have to get characters when one character is gone and what happens to the character who's gone, all that stuff just really adds a ton of charm to it, makes it just one of my favorite kind of, I guess, rock and roll movies. Now, Heavier Trip, not quite as good, but still a lot of fun. Now, both these movies are pretty goofy and pretty tame for a black metal comedy, because you could imagine black metal stuff getting super dark. Neither of these movies gets really that dark, and I'm sure that some, true face-melting fans would find it a little too safe. But I think some of the charm of it, the idea that these guys are, and black metal in general is such a scary, dark mythology that it's got around it, and, dangerous and all this stuff. The fact that they're kind of these dorky dudes kind of really lines up for me a little more with the truth behind a lot of metalheads and people into that kind of stuff, having really been into metal in the early 80s. So for me, it really works. Now, Heavier Trip, story-wise, doesn't work quite as much. It starts out with them in prison based on what happens in the first movie. So essentially this movie is about them getting the band back together and trying to make it again. So there's a little bit of that kind of retread feel to it. They have somebody who's after them. You get to kind of, meet all of our old characters again. Luckily, we have all of the same cast as far as the main band members. I don't remember. I'm not going to say their name because I don't know. We're behind. It's a name that Greg might want to bleep out. Okay, I'll say it once. He can bleep it out if he gets this far into my review. Impaled Rektum, because I thought it was one of the toughest metalist names they could come up with. This is much more tropey in the sense of it's more about, big music producers trying to, co-opt a member of a band that already exists and, make them into a form that's much more palatable to the masses, and making them all kind of give up their true values as metalheads and kind of become more commercial. So there's all that kind of stuff going on, and they're going to try to go to Wacken, which is this big German metal festival, which really exists, I do believe. I've heard of Wacken before, but even them, the guys in the band, they think like, well, this we want to go to this festival, but it's too commercial for us. We're underground. We're the real metal, that kind of a thing. But all that being said, it kind of becomes a little bit of a road movie again, where they're kind of trying to get to Wacken. They're trying to keep the gig. They're getting chased by somebody. There's various strife with the band, and all of it is amiable, I would say, and very likable. Is it as good as the other one? Not quite. Is it as quite as fun as the other one? Is it quite as much discovery? No. Now, the things that really do work for me is there's a lot of great nods to actual metal stuff, which I'm sure that metalheads will get, and most people will get a little bit of it. But there's just silly things, like they go to this kind of very scruffy metal memorabilia museum near Wacken, and how some of that memorabilia is used in the show is kind of, in this movie, is kind of fun. But probably the best thing in this movie. And it was one of the best things in the last movie, but I feel the last movie was more rounded as far as there was a lot of stakes and a lot of fun for all of the band members. And in this one, where it's supposed to be about Turo, who's like the lead singer, in the first one, it really worked because it was like he was just such a loser, and him trying to kind of find his voice and his way, literally and figuratively, really got you behind him, as well as the other band members. In here, he is already kind of there, so he doesn't have as much to do. Whereas Zertrax, who is the stereotypical, face painted, white face, black, eye stuff that you see in black metal guys, especially Nordic. He has the outfit and everything, very gothic, leathery, studs and spikes and stuff. He is so interesting and much more fun than every character every time he's on screen that I started to feel throughout the movie like I really wish it was his story throughout. And there's a whole subplot, and I kind of get Wayne's World and Wayne's World 2, whereas Wayne's World 2 had all these cameos. This one doesn't have quite as many as that, but it does have a great cameo by Baby Metal and the growing infatuation of Zertrax with Baby Metal. And if you know him, he's the darkest, blackest metal guy. Like everything he likes has to be true, pure metal, full street cred. He can't like anything pop or weak, or he has to kind of put on that facade, and he kind of prides himself on this arcane knowledge of metal. And he's very unhumor. He doesn't have any humor, just straight face, and he doesn't take it lightly. His metal is his life. He believes it all, and the way he walks through this movie is so great. And then the fact that he starts to become a little bit infatuated with this pop, Japanese metal girl group called Baby Metal, which does exist. If you haven't looked them up, they're pretty famous for that. In fact, Gimme Chocolate is the one that I think they play in the movie, and probably their most famous song, but they have a lot of other pretty great ones. The fact that he becomes infatuated, he doesn't even want to admit it to himself, with Baby Metal, that whole subplot is a lot of fun. And it could have gone further as far as I'm concerned. The whole movie could have become Zertrax, path through life. Just watching him interact with the world would have been, I think, overall a better movie. All that being said, I still had a lot of fun with this movie. I'd probably give this 3.5 stars, whereas the other movie, I think, if I remember correctly, I put it up like 4.5 or 5 stars. I just love it. This movie, I like. If it was on, I'm not turning it off. I'll watch it. This is definitely one of those kind of you can drop in, drop out kind of movies. Dumb fun. For me, it works mostly. So 3.5 stars for Heavier Trip, directed by, I didn't write his, I don't know if I can say his name, Juso Latio. I might have said that totally wrong. Sorry, Juso, if that's your name.